Hello, my name is Dan Brown. Today I'm going to show you how to create a simple sign in SketchUp using a existing Illustrator file. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch SketchUp, which I have already here, and I'm going to go ahead and also open the Illustrator file. So here you notice just a simple building identification sign done in Illustrator with copy, some dimensions, and some notes. The first way I like to create models in SketchUp from AI is a simple generic model, so I'm not going to get into too much detail in the model. It'll just be more about the volume and shape of it versus creating a more detailed model, which I'll get into later. I'm just going to turn off the dimensional layer, that way I have just the drawing information here. And there's a couple ways that you can grab this imagery and bring it into the SketchUp model. One way would be to export it out as a DWG. That will give you the line work, but it won't give you any of the actual images. Another way is to actually select the imagery, copy it, and then paste it into Photoshop, and then export it out as a JPEG or PNG. I could also export directly from here as a PNG. The only challenge or difficult with this is it doesn't limit to just your selection. So it's going to export the entire image here, including the person to the left and the other sign type. So what I figured is an easy way to resolve this, as well as a time saver, is in SketchUp you're never really going to look at the sign any greater than this level of detail. So I'm okay with screen capturing this image and then just using the image, or the screen capture, sorry, as the image to import into SketchUp. To screen capture on a Mac, you simply need to use Command, Shift, and then the letter 4. And I'm going to capture from the bottom corner here. And I'm also, whoops, click too early. I'm going to include, there we go. Going to include the side elevation. I could do it as a separate import, but I'm going to import all as one image, that way I don't have to scale it later. So that looks pretty good there. I'll release, and it'll snapshot that, and it'll actually place it on my desktop. So there you can see the image that was imported on my desktop and the two ones that I messed up by accident. Next, I'll go into SketchUp, go to File, Import, select my image, make sure I have Use as Image selected, as well as for the format, all supported image types, and I'll click Import. I'm just going to place it on the bottom point here, and I'm going to scale it up. Now before I click that, I'm going to go back into Illustrator. I'm going to turn on the dimensional layer, and I'm going to notice that the total height of this sign is 5 feet 1.5 inches, plus a little bit of the top piece here, but to that point there is 5 feet 1.5. I'm just going to remember that, because right now I'm going to type in a distance. In this case I'm just putting 5 feet 2 to get it close. And although it's not directly to scale, I can use the tape measure tool, measure from the bottom up to this point here, type in my new distance, which is 5 feet 1.5. Hit enter. Oh, did an error there actually. With the tape measure tool, when you click it, see the little plus sign is checked on the cursor? Use option to turn that off. That way it doesn't create a guide, it actually just measures. And now this time let's actually measure. It's right about there. 5 feet 1.5. Hit enter. It's going to ask me to resize the model. I'll go ahead and click yes. So now we have our 5 feet 1.5 inches to here, and our width, which is about 1'9", should read about that as well. And you can always look in the bottom right hand corner of the value control box to see what your measurement is. Next thing I'm going to do, this is only an image. We want to actually draw on top of this. So I'm going to right click using the select tool. I'm going to right click and explode the image. You can orbit around now and you can actually see that this is now a surface that I can draw on. Now it's laying right now on the red and green axes. I want to rotate this up so that it lines up to the blue axes. It's a simple way to do this. I'll just take the select tool and double click. So it selects the surface and the edges of that plane. I'll click the rotate tool. You'll notice right now, just activating the rotate tool, it wants to rotate it only along the blue axes. Now if I'm lucky, I can sort of orbit this way to get the red axes to orbit from. Or instead of clicking on the first click, if I click and hold or click and drag out towards the red axes, it'll actually flip the orientation of the protractor here. In this case I'll release, and that's my first click. My second click is the reference angle or the reference location. So I'll just click anywhere along the green axis. And then the third click determines your angle of rotation. And in this case I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Now that I have it flipped up, I'm going to take this line here. I'm going to press M for move, Option to bring up the copy. I'm going to copy this line from the bottom point here over 1'9" for our width of the sign, and that way it splits this object into two separate pieces. Now for the other width, I'm just going to eyeball it. Looks like it's 8 inches. And the image might be off slightly. We'll just move it a little bit. Now with two separate pieces here, I can now erase the inside edges there. That way I have two separate objects. I'll double click on this. I'll use the rotate tool and just rotate this 90 degrees to turn it back. Just refer to the AI file, that way I know my width. So the overall width is 8 inches and the middle section is 6 1/4. So that's 7/8 of an inch between the edge here and the line here. So back in our SketchUp model, I'm just going to move this in. Actually, we can draw a guide So I'm going to draw a guide here, 7/8, and another one here, 7/8, just so I know that those line up. I'll move this in 7/8. Draw another guide, that way you know everything's lining up. And I'll extrude this back surface using the push-pull back to this point here. And because we have that guide there, it's actually intersecting the element in our model. Next, I'll take the paint bucket, which is B on the keyboard. Hold down Command, brings up the little eyedropper. And I'll sample the side piece here and apply it to the surface here. And because everything lines up, the image is going to line up with our model as well. Next, I'm going to create this piece. Because it is a nice detail here, I think it is worth creating here. And I always like to just refer back, see if there's any specs that I need to know or any detail. And I think what I'll do is we're going to offset this 1.5 inches from the top using the guide. Remember, that's a tape measure. Because I'm considering this 1.5 inches to be the actual radius. Draw another guide down 7 inches, because that's the location from here to the top. And then now I'm going to take the arc tool. I'm going to draw from those guides that I created to create that arc and that arc. And I'll draw a line down along the bottom here as well. We can now erase with the eraser tool. It's E on the keyboard shortcut. You can erase the guides as well. And now I can select this line, hold down Shift, again with the select tool, and select all of those lines there. Click on the offset tool, offset from this edge inward, and it looks like it's 1/2 inch to get our piece here. With this element, I'm going to double click on it. I'll then right click and make it a group. Because we created all that detail, I want to make it a group, that way I isolate it and I don't have to worry about it touching or interrupting other geometry in the model. With it grouped, I'll select the move tool and I'll move it in the green axes, or excuse me, in the red axes, until it lines up with the front of that image. Now with the object here, I'm actually going to push it down, push the surface down a little bit. I'm going to use the tape measure again just to mark this endpoint right here. And now with the select tool, I'm going to double click on the profile of the group here. It's going to enter me inside the group, and you'll notice it shades out any imagery outside of the model or the active group that you're in. But it does show the guide, which in our case is beneficial because now I can extrude this and I can infer to the guide for my exact positioning of that. I can then take the paint bucket and I can sample this texture here. Although you can't see it, it is there. It's the original image. If I sample that, it remembers the location and position of that so that I can apply it now to this surface here. Now with the shaded textures here, it doesn't show up as nice. So what we're going to do is create a custom color from this material here. And it's very simple to do. In your paint bucket, all you have to do is just click on that magnifying glass, click on the color there, it'll make it active, and now I can just apply it wherever I see fit. And I'll actually apply it on the sides as well. See this line right here and here? If I take the eraser and erase the edge, you notice how I lose the entire edge. But with the eraser, if I hold down Option, which you can see in the bottom here, Option will actually smooth that into one surface. And you can even do the same for the inside elements here if you wanted to. So it looks like the color's slightly off. So what I'll do is double click on the material in the paint bucket. That brings up the active material. Now I'll click on the magnifier and see if I can get a closer color. Looks like it's still off a little bit. And it might also be from shading. Let's close out, see how that looks. I'm going to delete this guide here. Take the paint bucket and actually apply or sample this material side. Apply it on this side. If we wanted to, we could clean up these corner edges here. I know there's a lot more detail to how the side piece works here, but just for aesthetics and just for simplicity, I'm just going to create a little arc here. So you see how it breaks that profile onto the side like that. And then if I click on the top surface, which essentially selects or highlights the edges that make up that surface, I can then click the Follow Me tool, and I can single click on this area here, and it'll follow all the edges for that corner. Now it does adjust the textures, so see how it sort of skews the textures? I can fix that with the paint bucket, holding down Command to sample this area here, and then apply it up top. So sample and then apply. Sample and apply. Sample and apply. I'll double click all of this and just erase it with the delete key. I'll use the eraser as well with Option and hide these edges. Like we did before. So now it's looking pretty good. I could add a little gap and that little reveal there, but I'm not going to worry about it. Doesn't make that much of a difference from this view here. I'm going to go to Window Components, I'm just going to add a person from my library here. How about this guy? Let's give him a friend. Turn on shadows. I can sort of drag how I want this to look. Also, in the shadows panel here, if you click on this little details, you can adjust the lightness and darkness of the shadows. This is extremely helpful when you're trying to get the colors to work correctly. If it's too dark, you'll notice it really alters the brightness of that color. In this case, when I brighten that up, it does make that look a lot better. So I'm pretty happy with that. If I want to export this just as an image, I could go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And I could place that wherever I wanted to. Just make sure you go to Options, because this is where you can actually set the width and height in case you need to up the resolution of the image. Some other things that you can do is you can save scenes. Scenes are specific views of the model. So let's say this is one scene that I like. I can go to Window, Scenes. It's going to bring up this manager here, or palette here. I can just click the plus sign. See, it adds a little scene tab up here. You can orbit around this way, add another scene, and I can even change the time of day. And I'll add that as a scene. When you click on these scenes, SketchUp automatically transitions between each scene. And it does remember things like hidden geometry, as well as shadows, different layers, states, and several other options here in SketchUp. You can also use scenes to export animations. In case you're doing a walkthrough, you can walk through the different views of your model here. You can also use your standard views if you wanted to get a isometric view of your model. You can use that, or your standard top view, your front view, and your side view. Now these are in perspective. However, if you want them in axonometric, you can by going to Camera and then selecting Parallel Projection. And that'll give you a true axonometric. So when I go to top view, that gives me a true top view. The shadows are a little skewed for the people, so you may want to actually just hide them. You can select them, go to Edit, Hide. If you want a setting that I use a lot as well is camera 2-point perspective. So 2-point perspective allows you to keep your vertical lines straight. It really helps when you have a lot more detailed of a model. It just makes that nice sort of two-point perspective. So you'll see it sort of flattens the model a little bit, and you may have to pan up. But you'll notice the vertical lines are in fact completely straight. And then the vanishing point is somewhere off in the distance here. So that's one way that you can create a sign in SketchUp. The next video I'll show you how you can create a more detailed sign. It'll be the same exact sign. And then how you can document that or add notations and dimensions using Layout, which is Google's paper space program for SketchUp. Thanks for joining, and hope you enjoyed it.